All right, people, day 2, movie number 2 of the Talkin TV season 5 finale. We did Godzilla -1 yesterday with Dexter Fletcher, Lance Armstrong, and I'm joined once again by Gal Balaban to talk about one of the most interesting movies that I've seen so far of the year. This is a movie that I was looking forward to since it was announced. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Glazer, the director of this. His work that he did with Under the Skin was absolutely unparalleled. And Gal, all I'm going to say is, I was definitely not expecting a vibe movie about Nazis, to say the least, going in. Like, I knew that this movie was going to be about Nazis, but in terms of just like, oh, this is just a day in the life sort of thing, was not expecting that, to say the least. So, you have anything to say before we jump right into this?
Let's jump right in. This is interesting because I've seen this movie a couple months ago and you just got out of it. So I want to know a bit about your experience watching this movie. Let's get into everything.
Absolutely. All of that more will be covered on part 2 of the Talk TV season 5 finale. Stay tuned. All right, what is going on, people? We're recording this on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. I'm mostly telling that to myself just for editing purposes, for when I edit these 5 episodes all together into the big batched episode that will be released on Sunday. And for day 2, like I said, we are finally back in the world of A24. For everybody who's seen Dream Scenario, obviously good for you. I unfortunately have not watched an A24 movie since I saw Priscilla back at New York Film Festival in October. And I have to say that just the A24 brand in general has, let's say, not been the same since COVID. There just hasn't been the same. We've got like a few good ones, that are reminiscent of old, Ty West's X and Pearl, Everything Ever All at Once, The Whale. I had a lot of fun with Bodies when that came out last year. Red Rocket in 2021. But I feel like overall, the brand of A24, which was like kind of like the pioneer of, as far as like what was leading the charge for independent cinema for the last couple of years leading up to the pandemic, obviously, again, they made waves with movies like Room, Moonlight, Lady Bird, Hereditary, Uncut Gems was like their big push forward. And obviously smaller movies like The Lighthouse, The Witch.
I just realized you said they made waves with those movies.
Right, and I didn't realize that too.
Waves.
Well, they also did make the movie waves. They did make the movie waves, indeed. And so, right, so going into this movie, right, you've got Jonathan Glazer, who famously was already kind of like a not very prominent director to begin with, but an interesting one. He made his breakout with Sexy Beast in 2001.
Yeah, he's made Oscar-nominated movies still.
Yeah, but probably where I noticed him was his effort that he released in 2014 for A24, one of the earlier efforts from them, Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson, which is still one of the most fascinating and just interesting movies that I've seen, because that movie, it's basically making like Species, but like if it took itself seriously and wasn't a joke, which Species, the movie, pretty much is a joke, let's be honest here. And so obviously, it's been almost 10 years since that movie now. That movie came out in 2014. And when I saw this, it was kind of one of those instances where Under the Skin had such an impact on me that I'm like, okay, I don't care what this guy's next movie is. I can't wait to see it. Until I saw that, I'm like, oh, great. Another movie about Nazis, because people already didn't react negatively enough when Taika Waititi dared to portray Nazis in a humorous light in Jojo Rabbit. We all remember how well majority of people took that. So, needless to say, this didn't exactly. I mean, I'm still looking forward to it, but
movies, yeah.
Definitely a completely different movie to say. But you understand where I'm coming from at the very least. And so I watched it finally. It's taken me a little bit of time to watch it, but I finally got a chance to watch it. I literally just got out of it about an hour ago. It took me about a half an hour.
Which is so interesting. I think it's perfect that we're talking about this like right after you got out.
Yeah, literally right after.
I still remember my sort of, yeah.
It's one of those instances where I am definitely still processing it. I am definitely still processing my thoughts, my emotions, just everything that goes on, because it is definitely, I can say like immediately right off the bat that while it is definitely not one of my favorite movies of the year, it is certainly one of the most fascinating movies that I've seen this year. And certainly I don't think I've ever seen a movie like it where, oh, man. Yeah. I mean, just starting off from, like, the cinematography alone, like, the fact that Glazer purposefully chooses to place, like, everything at, like, beyond arm's length. Like, he shoots everything with very, very wide angles. He keeps everything in wide shots. I don't think there's a single close-up
Mhm,
in this
mhm.
entire movie. So everything is very purposely held at
It's
arm's length,
that's a
right?
really good point. Yeah,
Yeah, he doesn't want you to like really connect to these characters. He is very much sort of presenting it, I would
it
say,
almost
sort of like
yeah, it
almost
makes
like
like
what
a
Sean
time
Baker.
capsule
Yeah,
or like a fly on the wall time capsule effect for sure.
exactly.
And
It reminds me a lot of what Sean Baker did with the Florida Project, where a lot of that movie again is very much again keeping the characters at arm's length, wanting the
yeah,
audience to be a
yeah.
fly on the wall. Not really wanting them to like be inside these characters' heads. There's a few brief moments where we get to like, okay, this is what's like actually going on in their lives. So Gull, break it down exactly. What exactly? So you got to see this movie a couple of months ago at Toronto International Film
At
Festival. What
TIFF, yeah.
exactly is the Zone of Interest about? Like, break it down for me. Like, what's it about? What are your thoughts on it in general? While I still like just process mine.
Okay, yeah. So I saw this at the TIFF premiere, not world premiere, because it first premiered at Cannes, where
That's right.
Jonathan
That's right.
Glazer actually won Best Director. And so
Mhm.
I had heard about it from Cannes, and I heard that it was really something. So it was one of my most anticipated going in because I knew that it was going to be like an experience. Like I knew it was going to be like a relentless sort of movie, and it's basically about, like you said, it's almost a day in the life movie from the perspective of Nazi commander Rudolf Haas, who um, who he and his family basically lived across the wall from Auschwitz when he was stationed there as commander. Um, and yeah, it's a very different movie from anything that I've ever seen. I mean, you made the comparison to the Florida Project from the cinematography approach, but and you could say, oh, you might want to watch this if you watched Schindler's List or Pianist because it's about Nazis. But besides those remarks, I can't really compare this to any movie I've seen because Jonathan Glazer, he kind of changes or throws away like the classic approaches to narrative film because it doesn't really have a three-act structure. Like you said, like it's kind of the wide shot um, at arm's length. There's no real like title cards or real like effort to fill you in on history. But at the same time, this could only have worked as a narrative film. And the experience that it makes, I personally think, the term like masterpiece from a filmmaking perspective is thrown around a lot. I've heard it a lot for this movie, and I wouldn't really disagree because it's just so like it's so singular in what he's trying to tell. And um I've also visited those sites, and um, so like it even hits harder, especially. But something about the approach that he gives, I think the cinematography is like honestly some of the best I've ever seen because it's so key. Like you can't watch this movie without volume. The sound editing is so key. The way I listen to interviews, honestly, to prep for this, and he mentioned that the sound design was sort of there's movie one, which is the main movie, and then movie two, which is they sort of made this whole exchange of, dialogue or sound on what's going on in Auschwitz. But then that's like what you barely hear. They're not paying attention to that. The two movies have to like stay separate. Or I read that like to evoke like this day in the life feeling of like they would leave the camera on for 10 minutes sometimes to just like have them going about their lives, which is a really interesting approach.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. It's one of the things that I've loved just about like, more traditional narrative films where some of my favorite movies, for instance, There Will Be Blood or another Paul Thomas Anderson movie to compare, Phantom Thread, where you see like the first 10, 15 minutes, there's like no sound or dialogue. It's just like people going about their day and just
That's
going about their
a
daily
really
lives.
good
And
comparison.
and what's even more
Damn, like the
fascinating
Phantom Thread,
too,
that's really good.
exactly, like just him like fastidiously like going about
Like
his
with her
routine in the
trying on the
morning.
that's a really good
Yes,
comparison.
exactly.
Damn.
Not to mention the
Okay.
fact
You're
that
always great with these comparisons.
what can I say? I'm the encyclopedia when
Like
it comes to this thing.
like when
But
you
like,
talked
what's
about
even
like Poor Things with Kubrick, I listened to that. That was really
yeah,
yeah,
well, and what's even
shout
crazier is like if you're just like going into this without any knowledge of what it is, you might go like the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the movie before you even realize that like, oh, what, these characters are Nazis or anything, because the opening image and the opening routine of like them just going about their lives, like living in this in this townhouse that's like literally like right on the like the wall at the edge of their house, like right overlooking it, you can see Auschwitz, and like the sound design is so good because like as the movie goes on and the screams of the what's it called of the Jews that are in the camp are like just becoming more and more prominent. You know, they're kept very, very low in the beginning, and then they become more and more prominent. But again, like because what you're watching is so peaceful and it's just so day in the life, like you don't even realize that you're watching Nazis. And then like the movie almost works in tandem with you, where as you become more aware of what it is that you're watching, just the horror and just the true like disgusting nature of it ramps up. And like that was always the horror of the Nazis, right? It was the fact that they were human beings just like everybody else. You know, obviously, you know, we like to picture them as like these monsters of what's it called, you know, these monsters, these horrific villains, these evil people. But in reality, they were just people going about their day, doing their jobs. And the main character, right, Rudolf Haas, is introduced as being this this very political machination. He wants to work his way up the ladder, all that in order to maintain this beautiful life that they've built for themselves, whatnot. And just like the scare, this is one of the first, like you said, right? This is coming off a long line of Holocaust movies. Your Schindler's List, your Pianist, you know, Jojo Rabbit takes a very, very different take on it, but Jojo Rabbit, I feel it could be figured into that as well. There's numerous, Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Sure, yeah.
You know, I remember actually reading that novel. Yeah, Vita Bella, exactly. I remember, so I watched Boy in the Striped Pajamas and Life is Beautiful while I was in middle school and high school, respectively. So that was made, the horrors of that sect of history were made aware to me very, very, very early on, and also ties in with a little bit of my heritage as well. But but what's so fascinating, right, is seeing like what a different perspective this takes and how like you see. I think this is one of the only instances where I've seen like a Nazi become like aware of it throughout the end. Like by the end, like this movie is not, it's so difficult to describe because this movie is not like justifying any of their actions, but the fact that it's like showing you and placing it in such real time, in such a, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, in such an anachronistic way, where by nature
visceral,
of
maybe.
this, right, yeah. Visceral. That's even better. That's an even better way to describe it. Where by nature of the fact that this movie is so non-judgmental in its look at this family, you know, because at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, these are kids, you know, they don't know any better, you know, like they're just going about their lives. This is just their life. They have no understanding of it. But again, contrasted with some of these beautiful renditions where you have like these vistas where it'll just all of a sudden transition to like all black, except for the characters who are like shadowed in white in order to like show like more of the stark contrast, versus all the color scenes are shot with such like this.
That's insane.
Yeah, with such like this voyeuristic, like heaven-like look almost, right? The opening shot is like so peaceful as they're just relaxing in this vista. And like I said, because it is kept at such arm's length, because there are no close-ups, because you're seeing everything from afar, right? You feel like you're almost like an intruder, but you can't look away almost. It's so fascinating, all of those different things and all those different emotions which Glazer is evoking from you.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know what it was like for you. Were there a lot of people in your screening when you went?
There were.
I don't know if you...
So it's so interesting. I saw it at the Angelica Film Center in downtown New York, and I saw it at 11:30 in the morning. And there were like more people than I expected there, but the theater was not packed by any stretch of the imagination. I purposefully, purposely sat in the back, away from everybody else, in the last row, just so I could like kind of have that experience for myself. And like sitting that far back from the screen was even more, I think, created even more of like a visceral experience for me, because there were points where I'm just like sitting there and I'm just like, oh my God, especially when they're contrasting the back and forth with like the little girl who's getting all the apples in black and white with Rudolph reading the story of Hansel and Gretel to his kids. I'm just like, oh my God. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I saw this. Well, my theater was full because a TIFF screening, obviously, but I sat really like up close in the theater, and I feel like you could feel it in the room. Like you could hear a pin drop because everyone was sort of glued. Like you were, the person who I talked to who was sitting next to me said like you kind of felt like you were sucked like into this time capsule, like you were lifted out of your seat. Because the beginning, there's this like really long like black screen music overture. I feel like that's sort of like this like gateway into like here, leave your reality, enter this time period in like a really dark way. And then so it sort of felt like the experience of watching it was like consuming you in this really twisted way. And what you said about non-judgmental, I feel like I understand where you're coming from. In any other context, like without knowing what the movie we're talking about, maybe that's not the right word, but because we're talking about the movie, and I know what you mean. Like I totally understand
Yeah.
why you chose that word. I feel like if
Within the
anything,
context of it.
it's more sort of like, yeah, I feel like if anything, like in terms of non-judge, again, I don't love that word, but it's like sort of what Jonathan Glazer is going for, like you said, is finding, as much as I hate to say it, like the commonalities, because they're still
Not even the
human
comment. It's finding the
beings who
humanity.
made evil
It's finding the
choices.
right.
Like
It's finding the
because it's not like
humanity.
Joe, yeah,
Yeah, it's finding the
it's
humanity
like
and
Jojo
making you
Rabbit where they.
right.
So no, I don't want to leave that sentence out because it's not like Jojo Rabbit. What I meant to say is it's not like Jojo Rabbit where they make them out to be like these twisted, these insane clowns who say Heil Hitler all the time. This is like they're people who managed to lead these lives in this system that led them to like ignore these atrocities based on bigotry and nationalism. And so I guess like they make it look innocent in that way because, you know, for the kids it was, for a lot of people, because they were so, you know, they were so brainwashed into
Yeah.
bigotry and ignorance. Like they wanted to know nothing. Like even there were so many small lines that kind of haunt you. Like you said, like they built this beautiful life for themselves. This scene where Sandra Huller is like, "We built such a good life here," which is such a crazy thing to say there. Or
Right.
when someone mentions to the commander that like his wife sent the her wife sent the Führer Hitler flowers or something. So it's like even love is being poured into this system of evil that was existing all across a continent, which is just, I guess, in that way, really paints like this. I think it does an incredible job in painting a time period in such a broad way, not without even showing us that much, but it still makes you understand exactly what was going on that side of humanity in this exact period of time, because of like, yeah, it's, I don't really know how to finish that sentence, but yeah.
In order to in order to reflect on your points that you just brought up, what I find is that most films are about trying to find the humanity in order to create a sense of empathy, right? In order to, because that's ultimately how you connect with films. It's how you're able to connect with characters in films, and it's how you are ultimately able to see an experience that might be totally antithetical. In fact, most of the time films are antithetical to most
Mhm.
people's existence, but you're still able to find some commonality there, right? What this movie is trying to do, and what I feel like, this has in common with Glazer's other work, because I find it interesting that you mentioned that this isn't like a lot of his other movies, is Glazer is very purposefully exposing the humanity to evoke a sense of dread, you know, in the sense of,
Yeah,
it is by finding that sense of common humanity in people who have otherwise been vilified by history, and rightfully so, that creates this overwhelming sense of just horror when you realize that, what people are capable of, and they don't have to do it from a sense of maliciousness. In fact, most of the time they're not doing it from a sense of maliciousness, or if they are, it's so well covered up that not covered up, that's the wrong
I
word.
think it's the second option for you.
Yeah, it's
It's
so well. It's just been like they've just been like
it's
so
almost
conditioned
delusion.
to it. Exactly, that's exactly what it is. It's delusion. But
Like
even
you said, they're
delusion,
working hard to create this great life for them.
right?
Like I said,
And when
great
I say
life. Like,
and when I say great life, I mean it's the sense of like what I truly mean by that is blissful ignorance is what it is. It's blissful ignorance, but not even,
of
because
course,
you know that because the wife character portrayed again in Sandra Hüller in her second of two brilliant performances this year after Anatomy of a Fall, she absolutely has some knowledge of it. She's telling him to freaking suck up to the Fuhrer, to Hitler himself during it. So she clearly has some knowledge of what her husband does and just the atrocities that are committed every single day. I mean, they hear the freaking screams of the people who are dying every day in the concentration camp right next door to them. So, oh my God.
yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of the point that we were both making. Is like because they were conditioned into, the horrific anti-Semitism that we saw that led to one of the worst atrocities ever in humanity. They kind of just went about their lives. They didn't care. Like to them, it wasn't people the way we see other people over there, which is, like, especially like for me comes from a bit of a personal place also, that this movie hit so hard because I am Jewish, and a lot of my great great grandparents unfortunately um, fell victim to the horrors of the Nazis, and my great grandparents like fled to Israel when they were hearing about the rise of Nazism. So I think in that way it even hits further when they show you for almost the entire movie you never see on that side of the wall. But if you don't want to know what you see at the end of the movie, warning. At the
Yeah.
very end, you sort of see shots of modern day Auschwitz, which is can't even. I don't love calling it a museum, but a tourist site, a
Right.
museum where you
It's
can
kept. I would
now
say
see all those.
in order to make sure that the atrocities are
Yeah,
never forgotten.
yeah, exactly. And having been there, sort of the placement of that scene with like the all the people's crutches and shoes and suitcases kept there as a memorial, that hit incredibly hard for me. I
Yeah.
think like that ending just stuck with me for the rest of the evening, um, and just adds a whole nother layer of like my because that was last November where I went to Poland, and so honestly, like watching this movie almost a year later, I think like capped off something in my experience of connecting more with that period of history.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
the
Couldn't
greatest
agree more.
compliment for this movie.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, that ending shot is just when I came out of the movie, the only word that I could think of specifically after that ending, and the shot is very purposefully inserted, not as the closing shot of the movie, but rather an insert shot from the main character's perspective as he's leaving this party that's just been renamed in honor of him as he's about to undergo this absolutely horrific what's called strategy of what
Yeah, like
of just
relocation,
yeah, of relocation. And then you see him like staring
liquidating the
down the
ghetto. Yeah,
hallway. And then you have the insert shot of the modern day. And then it cuts back to him before it cuts to
and he
black
just
again. It's
keeps
just,
walking.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just sitting there like, it was a combination of I both couldn't leave my seat, but also I couldn't wait to get out of there because I was like, oh man, just like the fact that like this is just emphasized, like I said, from just such a, because again, so many of these movies, like, like obviously, just look at Schindler's List. Ray Fiennes is rightfully portrayed as an absolute monster
hmm
in that movie. And like, nobody, again, you never see anybody actually carry it out. You hear it, right? It's constantly as part of like the ambiance of the movie, but you never actually see anything. And that in a way makes it almost scarier. And also, I don't want to go too far, but there are a couple scenes when I see, the gardeners when they're like working and I see them pour in what I can only assume to be human remains as compost and fertilizer on there. And I'm just like,
yeah. Oh my
yeah,
god.
I'm just like,
There are some incredible uses of symbolism, both in the dialogue
yeah,
and like the stories that they tell, or the music that playing that's like implied to be like music written by Jewish artists, or even like you said, like items, like even the slide into the swimming pool looks
yes.
like something horrible that you would see
Mm-hmm.
in a Auschwitz crematorium or something like you said. I think it's like it's weird that I don't say this from a place of a movie that I want to rewatch because I enjoyed it. I do want to rewatch it just to pick up on more of those things
Yeah,
because
yeah.
this film was such a fascinating experience. Like I said, there were times where I winced at that kind of stuff, but it makes you like want to keep watching just because it's so brilliantly
Right.
put together. Um,
Yes.
by the way, how do you feel? This movie, in terms of Oscar chances, we saw it get nominated for the Golden
Yeah.
Globe for drama. How do you feel about this movie's Oscar chances in general?
Very interesting because again, like so many other Glazer movies, this is not like a typical Oscar baity movie. Now, even though
Mhm.
while it is about a
For sure.
subject matter that the Oscars love, they love Holocaust movies. But because of
Yes.
how
Yeah.
it's shot and because it's not shot in like a typical Oscar baity way, I think that outside of Best Picture and possibly adapted screenplay, I think that Sandra Hüller, they're going to put more of a push behind her because this is A24, but Anatomy of
Right.
a Fall is Neon. I have to assume that they're probably going to put more of a push for her behind her for Best Actress as opposed to Best Supporting.
For
And I
sure.
think
For sure.
I think this movie will definitely be more in the technical chances because again, the cinematography, the editing, the sound design is just impeccable. And also, too, probably the best use of a non-score that I've seen since No Country for Old Men. I know there's like brief bits of like musical score in the beginning and the very end with those cuts to black, but other than that, there's no
I kind of wish there was more of it. If there's any complaint I have this movie, I would have loved more of that score, because the score is amazing.
I'm going to disagree only because I think that it was so purposefully well done in terms of, again, just making you sit with each scene. And like, I feel like for me, at least, any sort of a musical, like a score other than the ambiance, the backdrop would have been distracting for me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's still left an impression so much. That's why, if anything, I would have loved to hear more of it, just because it makes an impression as the bookends of the film. But that score was also nominated for, I think, Golden Globe for sure, maybe also Critics' Choice. Also, when I saw the movie, I felt similar as you. Like, look, honestly, if you came out of this movie saying that wasn't what I expected, I was kind of bored by the pacing, even though I got the message, I wouldn't blame you, just because it's so different in structure and pace from any movie that I've watched. But also, I just feel like, first of all, the awards attention it already got, and also the fact it's been campaigning since Cannes, and I feel like it does have something strong to it, or it could be like 10, 11, 12 now in my predictions for picture.
Right.
But
the other thing too to consider as well,
for original score.
Yeah, sorry, not to cut you off, but there was one other thing to consider as well, which is the foreign language of it all. Which is, again, this is a movie that is
that's what I was going to say.
It's entirely in German, and we know that the last couple of years, right, the Oscars have been really trying to go out of their way to make sure that they get a foreign language film in there. You know, you have Triangle of Sadness last year, Drive My Car the year before that. So I would say that, like, this movie, in terms of its best,
I think you mean All Quiet on the Western Front last year.
Sorry, you're right. All Quiet on the Western Front.
Triangle of Sadness was in English.
Well, Triangle of Sadness was in English, but it was a foreign language co-production. But you're right. All Quiet on the Western Front is the one that I'm thinking of.
But yeah, what I mean is, like, so first of all, Anatomy of a Fall, France didn't submit it. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a great chance to get into picture. I think it does. Right. But the Zone of Interest is being submitted by the UK as their submission. So I honestly think it has a strong chance to maybe even win that. And cinematography, I would also bet strongly. Potentially directing, I'd be down for that.
Yeah,
but
I'm not
I feel like
against
it's one of those that could be a dark horse to get a couple of strong ones. I don't know if picture, but I feel like cinematography would be a really
cinematography 100%. Especially because, like, I mean, let's face it, Oppenheimer's going to sweep when it comes to the technicals, but I would say this is like a very, very probably the strongest rival to Oppenheimer when it comes to that. And like I said, as far as everything else, like I said, sound design, production design, all impeccable. But yeah, as far as this being like potentially
sound design, sound design.
Yeah. As far as being like the 10th best picture choice, I can absolutely see that happening. Because like I said, there's still a couple more
that
movies.
Or like Color Purple, I don't know.
Yeah, Color Purple.
Triangle of Sadness, like you said, it was also an international one that came out as Best Picture nominee when many weren't expecting it. I could see this having a similar path.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so it'll be very interesting to keep track of this movie's Oscar choices or Oscar chances as we get closer to awards time. Like I said, I have a couple more Oscar movies that I am that I'm watching. Like I'm watching Maestro tomorrow, and I'm also rewatching Ferrari. And Ferrari has been like an interesting one, keeping track of it since it really had its big premiere. So I'll be interested to see where those go going forward. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. Like I said, shorter episodes each day going forward until the end of the week when we cap it with Rebel Moon.
By the way,
so we're doing
Oh, to cap it, I've actually only seen one other Jonathan Glazer movie, which is Under the Skin. So what else should I go to in his filmography?
So I think it's funny that you mentioned that because Jonathan Glazer has actually not directed that many movies. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is only his fourth feature film. He's directed a lot of music videos,
you're right.
A lot of commercials, and a decent amount of short films. But yeah, other than Sexy Beast in 2001, which got a supporting actor nomination for Ben Kingsley, Under the Skin with Scarlett, and this movie, Zone of Interest, he has only directed one other movie, which is 2004's Birth. Which is a French film starring Nicole Kidman and Lauren Bacall.
Nicole Kidman.
Yep. So
which always looked interesting to me, but I don't know if you've seen them. I haven't yet.
I have not seen that. I have also not seen Sexy Beast either. I've only seen Under the Skin, but I've heard great things about Sexy Beast.
Perfect. Got it.
So yes, you're in the same camp as me. So like I said, be interested to see this movie's Oscar choices. Like I said, tune in. So not only will this be the only episode that we put up today, later on tonight, Dustin the Duster Mason and I will be doing our Bradley Cooper Hall of Fame in honor of Maestro, which gets released officially on Netflix tomorrow. So that'll be a lot of fun to do. So stay tuned for that later on. We've also got, like I said, we got Maestro and Ferrari, which we are doing tomorrow night. Then Thursday, we've got the Iron Claw, and we're wrapping it on Friday with Rebel Moon. So like I said, people, we are sticking tuned to it. One day, one movie, one podcast each day for this week. Gal, before we get out of here, your final thoughts and star rating for The Zone of Interest.
Right now it's sitting at 4.5 stars. We'll see what a rewatch does, but I don't see it leaving my top 10 of the year anytime.
Yeah, definitely going to need a rewatch for me before I consider putting this in the top 10. But yeah, just as far as like definitely one of the movies that I'm going to be thinking about for a very, very long time. I'm right there with you. 4.5 out of 5. One of the, again, just I can only think of one word coming out of this, which was just absolutely haunting, just completely haunting.
Yes.
So yeah,
could not think haunting the movie.
Yes,
and I use that word a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it fits. It's rightfully so. It's fitting. So, Gal, thank you so much for coming on again. What's it called? Like I said, part 2 of the Talkin' TV season 5 finale. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Film Toppings on Instagram, YouTube, and Feature Fanatics Pod, which is me and my friend's podcast. So, yeah, all of that stuff you can find on Instagram, YouTube, and so on.
All right, excellent. I'm going to save my plugs for the end of this episode once it is officially released on audio. Everybody who's watching us right now on YouTube and Twitch, you guys know where to follow me. It's all in the links in the bio. So in the meantime, I will bid you guys adieu. 12 seasons in a short film, and we'll see you guys later tonight for the Bradley Cooper Hall of Fame.